Sure. Well, I thank you for the one today of fellowship with Eddie brothers and help lead us and um, help us do with this instruction and we continue with Parrish Isaiah. Continue prayers for our country, which is in turmoil, and we know it's under your sovereignty, but we do know that the first is still better against the big part of this year. We just pray that you continue to reach out to them and pray to see that you are the sort of power and sort of authority for all. Continued prayers for my family. We've had a lot of issues and deaths and everything. So sicknesses, but also other people. Extend healing, blessing to those who are hurting. Like family members that are hurting, and we continue to strengthen our faith in
Thanks, Chris. What I gave you is a copy, both sides, so you haven't flipped it over yet. This is an approximation of dates. We have one side is the Bible history. They give you some approximate dates of perhaps when they think creation started at some time. These are approximate. To give you some idea when the books were written in the Old Testament. Some other information, things I've been talking about when people lived and died and so on, and we're in the book, of course, of Isaiah. Isaiah is one of the major prophets. There's a few major prophet sections, and there's a few minor prophet sections. So we've already been in some of the minor prophets. On the other side, there's a timeline talking about things to come. It's not in depth. It's not like a Revelation study. It's not in depth, but it gives you some kind of ideas. And I wanted you to have this. I found it in some of my books that studies that I had done a long time ago. Matter of fact, in the book of Isaiah, I had these tucked away somewhere in my notebook. And I wanted you to have these just for your own information. If you hang on to this, sometimes when I'm talking about different dates and approximate dates of when the children left Egypt and all these other things, it'll hopefully fit in with your studies. So these are yours. There's no charge. You can fold them up and make airplanes out of them, or you can hang on to them and use them for reference. But those are for you guys. So guys up north, out in the Midwest, up in Jaguar, you guys are gonna have to wait. So I'm not mailing you to you. Paul and Gary and all you guys. Welcome. We're going to be finishing up chapter 9, and hopefully we'll get as far as we can in chapter 10, maybe even to chapter 11 this morning. Last week we talked about chapter 9, verse 10. So just turn in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 10. Just want to finish up a couple of thoughts on that, and then we can begin from there. Yes, sir.
I was questioning from your studies or exposure, seminary and things like that. Does anybody figure out why that period of time was so massively specific? I mean, I don't understand, like from early books of the Bible, we understand with the history of Israel, it's a lot more specific. But then we hit this point where it just exploded. Well, you had your prophets and you had the separation of the North and the South and everything, and then going right into the period where there's no prophecy, it's just Jesus came. I mean, has anybody ever forecasted why that all seemed to happen all at the same time like that? Other than saying that God's sovereignty is.
Well, very good.
I mean, it's kind of like the same situation as. Well, you look at our history, and just everything's happening encapsulated, boom, at this time. And you can say, okay, well, yes, the end times and everything, but it's just like there was this time of growth and organization, but then all of a sudden you had this specific time where everything was happening all at the same time. You had Babylon captivity, and then everything boom, 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 which yeah, it's still like 100 years, but I mean, it's like those are the capital. Has anybody ever said anything?
So there's been a lot of studies on that, and get into putting like in a systematic theology class, putting things together. A lot of people think that miracles happen all the time, and in a sense they do. I'm trying to get saved, it's a miracle. John 5:24 says the passing death on the life of God. It's kind of like it's that happened. And so the miracles that were done were to authenticate the messenger or the message. And Ezekiel was a messenger. He was in captivity, and he did a lot of it. We studied Ezekiel. He did a lot of things rolling over on the side for so many days and so on to picture what would happen to the children of Israel. In the Old Testament, God started out with Adam and Eve, and there was a long period of time between creation and the flood. And it was man left kind of to his own conscience. And God said that anything man wanted to do, he'd end up doing it. Of course, the Tower of Babel also came after the flood. So you have different periods where God has used different nations, different peoples to get his point across. Israel was the main focus after Moses. I mean, we knew that Jacob started with 12 tribes. We didn't know a lot about it until Moses let the children out. And so we find that there's been a lot of things happening, but there's long periods that you sit between there. It doesn't mean there was nothing happen. It's just that history doesn't record it. The Bible doesn't record it. John said if you wrote down everything that was in there, Jesus said it would be enough books to cover it. So like I tell people, I said, well, the Bible doesn't mention cars, airplanes, or things like that, motorcycles, except for Joshua's triumph. There's a motorcycle mentioned in the Bible. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate you understanding that joke. And then the disciples were all in one accord, so they were in a car. Enough of that. But the idea is that as you look at this date thing, that should help you. When you look here, miracles didn't happen that often. Miracles only occurred, and they occurred in a lot of things when you had to be 10 plagues. Those were miracles by God. You had Satan. People were able to repeat the first three. They turned the water to blood and so on. So God was destroying what the Egyptians believed they were gods. They had these gods, the rain god, the Nile River god. They worshiped the frogs. They worshiped this. They worshiped that, cattle, and so on. And so God systematically wiped out every one of them. They worshiped the sun, and the ninth plague was darkness. So, oh my gosh, the sun always comes up and so on. So there was differences in the way God dealt with Israel. Now Israel has been scattered, and as of I guess it's Matthew chapter 12, when Jesus was talking about the kingdom was at hand, when he was rejected as the nation of Israel, he said, "I'm now going to turn to the Gentiles." And so we have the time frame of the church being in Pentecost and so on. So there's different epochs of time. That's why we are a dispensational church. We believe that God deals with humans, mankind, in different ways over different periods of time. And so whether you actually believe there's 7 or 8 or 9 dispensations, some people discount different things. You have the human government, you have innocence, you have your own conscience, all these things that people insert. It doesn't really matter how many you have, just realize you God deals differently at different times in history, which makes us a dispensational church. Well, God is working in this period of time. There's a lot of minor prophets that work prior to them going into captivity, while they're in captivity, and post-captivity. And then you have the whole history of Israel in the Old Testament. The churches in the New Testament. So if we look at it that way, the Old Testament means an awful lot of information about Israel. Israel was supposed to be God's how can I put this? He wanted the nation of Israel to be an example to the other nations around. What it would take and what would you have as a result if you followed God. And because Israel was chosen by God from Jacob on, you find out that they're just like us, or we're just like them, that we can't keep following God. We start wandering away and so on. So the prophets and all the other people that were there were supposed to warn the people. In the New Testament, when they claim, so you killed all the prophets, they did. Incidentally, we'll discuss later, but there's a Justin Martyr in the 2nd century believes from oral tradition and some written tradition that Isaiah was sown in half. When you get into Hebrews chapter 11, it talks about somebody sawn in half. And according to tradition, they would put people inside tree trunks, followed out tree trunk. Tree was dead or so on, and sitting in a tree trunk, you tip it over and then they saw them in half. And there's according to Justin Martyr, with evidence, either oral or some written, and Isaiah was the one who's talked about this in chapter 11 of Hebrews. So we're looking at spots of history as we go through the book. We know that Revelation begins at the time that John was alive on this earth. The Apostle John, the 7 churches, from chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation was his time frame. Everything from chapter 4 and 5 all the way to the end is future. And so when you get some of these books, have a lot of when we get in chapter 11, it's just filled, 11 and 12, it's just filled with promises about Jesus Christ. He's the root of Jesse and so on. And so that descendancy. So you're right, it is sporadic because there's so much happening, you can't get into too much detail. Like First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles are almost mirrored accounts. There's just a little bit more information in Chronicles. They were the historical books of the kings. That's why it's called King. And so First and Second Chronicles would be third and fourth king. So it was all about the kings somehow. Saul, David, and Solomon, and then when the kingdom split, everybody to the king. That's where it learned the things from the north and the south. So there is history there, and it covers what? The book of Judges covers about 300 years. So it's a long period, and you'll hear about spots of it. I read sometimes in Judges, and I say, I can't believe they were oppressed for 80 years, or, why did you wait so long to crowd to go? I cry out almost every day, God, somebody picking on me, that kind of thing. So you're right, but that's all we have. I can't explain it other than the fact that that's the way God designed it.
Stu,
Yes, sir.
when we cover those Old Testament books that you're talking about, one of the themes that you kept pulling out for us is God's patience is long suffering. He would chastise Israel, and when they behaved, he would bless them. And then when they would behave, he would correct them, judge them, or in some cases, kill a few in the desert. In his sovereignty, he knew it was going to be that difficult for humanity, was going to handle free will.
Yep.
And so he wishes that none would perish. And so, thousands of years go on, they have a chance. So now finally he sends Jesus. His disciples teach for a couple of years. Christianity explodes, goes throughout the world. And then around 400 AD, the church in Rome became the Roman Catholic Church, and brought in all the demon worship that the Romans had in there. Look what the Gentiles did to God's church immediately. After. So God is long suffering. He says, my church is going to prevail against the gates of hell. And here he is, it's only 400 years after, the disciples have preached the word and it's gone out. And look what's happened to the biggest Catholic, or the Christian church, was the Catholic Church up until, 1300s or 1500s. Why did God allow them to exist in there? Well, somewhere along the way, what was raised up, some real people who studied the Bible and says, this church is wrong. We're going to set this right. And and so here we are in the 21st century. We've had maybe 100 years of pretty good church expansion, and now we're facing apostasies. God is long suffering. He wants his people, but he's waiting to the time, like in Romans, Paul was saying, for I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, thus you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel will be saved. Well, that's future to us even. So look how long God is waiting. He knows that this event that Paul tells us is going to happen, and when they're saved, then we go right into the messianic 1,000 years. Takes thousands of years to show and prove to the world that an unsaved human being just cannot rule himself. Look how long it's taking for the majority to come to faith in the Lord. So that's part of it. I mean, it's complicated, but he is long suffering, and look what he's waiting to put up with for all of his people. But he's finally going to have his church with him in heaven, and Israel will be saved. He's very, very patient.
Yes, he is. All right. Anybody else? Jump in here, anyone? Thank you for sharing that, Jesse. You're right, and we have no one to blame but ourselves in each generation. Back in chapter 9 now, verse 10, this was the catalyst when God began to work with Syria and Damascus and with Rezin, with Pekah, who was the king in Ephraim, which is northern Israel, and his capital city was there in Samaria. And we've already looked at this through the book written by Jonathan Kahn in the Harbinger. We looked at that verse and how explosive it could be, and the Harbinger is a warning, an omen, an oracle, something like that, where he pointed out that the United States defenses were breached when the towers were attacked. Pentagon was attacked, and that was the Greece first time. We've had other people come over here and try to cause problems. We've had terrorists, doing this and doing that and so on. Some of the things that have happened in our country, you don't know who caused them, but never come on into this, catastrophe where thousands of people died just in one bomb attack. And so when you look at this verse, the problem with the verse was the arrogance of the people. God was sending Syria and Rezin and these people down there to harass the Israelites so they turned back to him. I mentioned last week and the week before, I'm pretty sure that whenever they plant a crop, the enemy would come down there when it was ready to be harvested to take it. If they planted vineyards and they had their wine made, they come down and take their wine. They just come down there at harvest time. It's almost like putting something valuable out in your garbage that just doesn't work anymore. When you put it out, our garbage picked up on Tuesday, we put out Monday night, it's not there Tuesday morning. It's people drive around looking for that kind of stuff. And so when you look at history, it is always God's calling and drawing people to himself. And some respond, some don't. Even the ones that respond lose faith and walk away from him. It's what's happened forever. Now, God is patient, and it's not like he is doing this for a long time because he's outside of the time. As we know, he created time for us. He created night and day, for a few days of creation. So we would know what time it is. And I can't imagine being without a watch. Some of you do not have a watch. Well, good. I don't wear a watch because my wife tells me the time to get up, time to go to bed. I need a watch. If you're working or you have a lot of fun, you need a watch, or it's on your phone. So if you don't have a watch, you have your phone to tell you this and so on. We're so time oriented that we arrange meetings every half hour. Sometimes it seems like we're so bound up by time. Sometimes we don't take time to relax and enjoy God. A lot of times, Tom will say, we just wasted today. We seized today. We chose just to relax and be with ourselves. So we wasted this morning. No, we not. No, we did, because we talked, we read some scripture, we watched a little TV or whatever it was. We were together as a couple, as one unit, and it was peaceful. You didn't get up and punch me, although I deserved it, but it was very peaceful. So we enjoyed the life that God gave us. And when you look at what God has given us, the rain, we've had a lot of rain yesterday and the day before, and probably get more, because that's what Florida's like. Wow, it's so green down here. Well, I think I moved down here partly because of green. Well, in order to have green stuff, you have to have rain. And in order to have the rain, you got to have something that's going to dry it up, which is hot sun. So I love it down. And if I didn't, I'd be back up in North Florida. But the idea is that God has given us this earth and given us this day to rejoice. Today's the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And so, yes, there's a lot of problems here, but God knows the time frame. It's not like he's up there, oh my gosh, I can't wait till that happens. I can't wait. He already knows the end from the beginning. And so I can't understand that. I really can't. I've never met anybody who can explain to me how to be out of time and still in time. I mean, Galatians says that in the fullness of time, the Son came. In the fullness of, why didn't the Son come, prior to, the Old Testament or something? Why did the Son come then? God said, in the fullness of time, my Son would. And then, as a matter of fact, in chapter 11, we get there, it's going to talk about his Son comes. We've already seen some other verses where a Son had promises come. Chapter 7, chapter 9 talk about his Son that's coming. And so it's not like he's disappearing because he's always been like this. He's the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow. So we're caught up in this time frame. And right now we're studying what happened to Israel. And you definitely want to be studying what happens to the church, the local church. We're still supposed to learn from this. So what do we learn from this? As Jesse brought up, as Chris brought up, God is long suffering, but there comes an end to his time. Why should you over the wicked die before their time? Hebrews says there's a time appointed for everybody to die. God said, okay, student, this is your date, this is your day, this is your hour, this is your minute, this is your second, you're going to die. It's all written down somewhere. If I resist God or turn out to be a horrible, horrible person, more horrible than I am now, he might just say, come on home. He's doing enough damage. Come on home. I've known people that were believers and their life was so bad it was pulling other people away from people, from God. And suddenly they were dead. They're gone from this world. Now we believe because they trust Christ as Savior in heaven, but their lifestyle was such an affront to God. Now what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, you're misusing the Lord's Supper, and for this reason, many of you are sick, some of you are weak, and some of you even died because you're misusing the Lord's Supper. That's why Kevin often says, examine yourself before you partake of the elements. If you get unconfessed, confess and make sure your heart is right before God before you partake of it. Otherwise, you're making a mockery of the Lord's Supper. So there is that period of time when God said, okay, I've had enough of you. You're my child. I've disciplined you. I've done this for you. I've done that for you. And that's what we're looking at. One of the things it talks about here is the remnant. You realize when the children of Egypt, or children of Israel, came out of Egypt, it was probably 3.5 million people, best estimates, 3.5 million people. During the Holocaust, they should kill 7 million Jewish people. Other times, they killed thousands and millions of Jewish people throughout all of history. In Romans chapter 9, it talks about the remnant that's going to be saved. Always the remnant. So Israel could claim, so we've always been populous, we'll always be a great nation, we'll always have plenty of people. No, God said, no, I'm going to knock you down, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to take you home, I'm going to discipline you that are false leaders and false followers and false prophets. I'm going to take you out of here if you're not a believer. In the Old Testament, if you're not a believer, you're going to Hades, and you're going to waste your judgment in Revelation, the white throne judgment. You can be judged for your sins forever. Throughout all eternity like the fire. Those believers back then turned from God. We're just going to call you on home. So you see countless times when God almost wipes out all of Israel. And so God hates sin, but he also hates sinners that refuse to turn to him. He'll take them out physically, whether they're saved or unsaved. He doesn't just pick and say, well, that person's saved, I'll just leave that person go. Now, if you're disobeying God and you're pulling away from him, you're supposed to be like Israel was, a light for the world, a light on a hill, and so on. Well, it's the same thing in the New Testament. We're supposed to be, we're not Israel, we're the church, but we're supposed to be a light on the hill, right? Well, hide your light in a bushel basket, Matthew. So, how many of us are light? Now, some of us might be a light, but we're like a 15-watt bulb. Not much light there. So, we're not the light, but we're supposed to be a reflection of light. So that's what's happening here. It's always been happening. So when we look at the section, we know there are promises out there, but you still have the nasty here and now. Right? So chapter 9, verse 10, what they said in arrogance and pride in their heart was, Syria has come down here and they raided us and so on, but we don't care. They broke down our wall. They come into our country to keep invading us. We're just going to build stronger defensive systems. We're going to build better and bigger, or bigger and better. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before. They're not saying they're gonna make Jerusalem great again, they're saying build bigger and better. And God said, no, you won't. Verse 11 says, therefore the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin, that's the one from Aram, against them, and spurs enemies on, the Syrians before and the Philistines behind. That's the north and east of those and west of where Israel was. It's interesting how the NLT, New Living Translation, translates the last part of verse 12. It's kind of separated there. It says, for all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. The way the NLT interprets that, but his hand is stretched out still, is his fist is still poised to strike. I think that's a much better translation. You look at that and you say, well, he's still reaching out to save people. No. He said he's not satisfied with what he's done here. He's going to keep on going because he's still angry. Can you imagine the strongest, holiest being in the universe is God, and he's also the angriest. But it's a righteous anger. If we get angry with our children, we spank them. We hope that it's to teach them to do right. We hope we're not just beating them because we're child beating. When's the last time you stopped beating your wife? That type of thing. So what is said here, and I would love the way the NLT puts that, because you've got that saying there in verse 12, you got in the last part of verse 17, you got over in let's see where it verse 21, then again in chapter 10 again for his anger, and it keeps ending with that, but his hand is stretched out still. His fist is still poised to strike. He's not done disciplining these nations. He raised up Aram and Ephraim, which is the northern 10 tribe, to get together with a treaty. They're going to come down and destroy Judah. Remember we talked about that last week, or week before, or both weeks maybe. They were coming together, brother against brother. Ephraim was one of the sons of Joseph, and his other brother Manasseh. They were brothers from Joseph, and they're getting together with Aram, Rezin, to come down and destroy Judah. They're other brothers. Judah and Joseph were brothers. And so when you look at that, you say, wow, that's really bad when you got that much animosity towards your brothers, that you hate them so much. And the verses that talk about that are really, when it talks about eating your own arm, the arm, they're not biting their arm. The arm is support. So the other tribes that help support them, they're fighting them and they're killing them. And some of the translations say murdering their children type of thing. But it's here fighting brother against brother. And they're to a point now where we're better than you are. We're mad at you because you got Jerusalem. So we're going to come down here and destroy you, and all this animosity. It goes all the way back to when Jacob and Esau were younger. We just studied Obadiah in our own study. Obadiah is all against Edom, who is Esau. The history of the two children, Esau and Jacob. Esau being the older, Jacob come out holding his heel, the supplanter, and God told him, Rebecca, the kid's struggling in your womb, they're going to be twins, and the younger is going to be served by the elder. And that's what happened. The older brother, Esau, he said, well, sell me I want your porridge. And Jacob said, well, sell me your birthright and I'll give you my porridge. Well, for a bowl of soup or whatever it is, bowl of vegetable soup or whatever it was, lentils, who knows what it was. Jacob bought his brother's birthright by serving the soup. That's how little Esau thought of it. Then when Jacob was dying, he wanted to bless his children. So the mother went ahead and put animal skins on her son, Jacob, and he went in and fooled his father. So he got the blessing from being the firstborn, and he got the inheritance from being the firstborn. He goes the roll over his father's eye. Of course, his father was blind. And you look at how can God bless that? That he did. And God always blesses us. And so he works it out. So when we're reading down here now, in verse 11, it says, therefore the Lord shall set up these adversaries and spurs enemies on, the Syrians before and the Philistines behind. But his hand is still, or his fist is still poised to strike. He's not done. Because verse 13, the people do not turn to him who strikes them, nor do they seek the Lord of hosts. Therefore the Lord will cut off the head and tail from Israel. Who are the head and tail of Israel? That is the leaders, the king and leaders. Who is the tail of the false prophets? And it says so in the next verse, that's why I know that. It says, the elder and honorable, he is the head, the prophet who teaches lies, he is the tail. For the leaders of the people cause them to err, and those who are led by them are destroyed. Therefore, there's so many therefores in these few chapters. Therefore, the Lord will have no joy in their young men. You're going to be killed in battle because they're being led by bad people, bad leaders. I think about our country, and I read our country in this section. We're being led by bad leader, very bad leader. We're being led by bad judges that give bad decisions, and they rob. In chapter 10, verse 1, look, it says, woe, translation there in the NLT there, the word woe, what sorrow awaits those who decree unrighteous decree, those who write misfortune, which they have prescribed to rob the needy of justice. I mean, they're still battling the January 6th people, still in jail with no charges yet, and they're still trying to get that straightened out. And they rob the needy of justice. They take what is right from the poor, and the widows may be their prey. So the very people that are in charge of the nation of Israel and the nation of Judah, because they're split, are leading the people astray. And we talked, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, somebody said, well, what about the people? If it just, is it the leaders that are turning, well, why are the people being led? Because they're following. Now, does that mean insurrection? No, it doesn't mean insurrection, but it means trying to get more prayer into the people back here. They didn't have recourse like we have. We can sue people, we can get lobbies against people and so on. We have election. They didn't elect their king. The king was appointed. The leaders were appointed, but it was the line of Aaron that was false. The people of the priestly line were crooked. They were taking bribes. The people in charge were taking bribes. So we have anybody like that in our government today taking bribes? It said, even though we can prove it, there's nothing being done. It's like, okay, so we've proven it, and nothing's being done. We watch these people, we know they're just going to walk away. And then they're talking about Trump and saying, well, nobody's above the law. By the people that are changing laws right now. And so we're in the same situation nationally as they were back then. Now, is God going to judge us? I can't tell you if he is or he isn't. But if he judges the people of Israel, there's no one group of people that God loves more than his church, the universal church of God. But by the same token, the church of God has its problems. You've got some bastions of learning, seminaries, colleges, allegedly Christian, have turned away from the inerrancy of the word. We've got some that are teaching work for salvation. We've got others that are teaching prosperity gospel. We've got others that have questionable people that are speaking on their radio program. And so we just sit here blindly and say, well, have you ever heard of this guy or that person there? Yeah, I've heard of them. I've read their statement of faith. Oh, where'd you get that? Well, you can Google that. It's amazing that some of the things that they haven't got to yet on Google that you can still get. Now, be careful when you go Google them. I Googled the other day, what is the centermost city in the world? Pardon?
Center, did you say?
Yeah, equidistant from earthquakes. You know what equidistant means? So where if you had one city in the world that was equidistant for every other place. In other words, this was the center. I've always learned that it was Jerusalem or where the Garden of Eden was.
Parrish, Florida.
Yeah. Okay, there's another incorrect answer. But the idea was that when I Googled that, they made it specific because they kept giving me other things. Well, you can do this, you can do that. Matter of fact, Google did talk about the Earth being round. Said, well, when you're doing because it's on a sphere, you have to account for this, that, and everything, the curvature of the Earth. And I thought I'll send it to my niece if he's separately flat. But anyway, so when I got it so specific, it said, well, you hold it. You have to state that you're over 18. You're not a robot. No, I mean, it was like, give me your email address. No, evidently I'm on a sensitive area here. But because they don't want to admit that. And that's the point where I'm trying to say is that God picks the earth as a resting place. I mean, that's where the temple is going to be during the millennium. That's where the new heavens and new earth will be on earth. And so, well, the earth must be regardless of God. He allows us to live here. He's not worried about climate change. Right? Or how many of you guys are worried about climate change? Well, just four of you. Anyway, so verse 18 of chapter 9, for wickedness burns as the fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns and kindle in the thickest of the forest. Now, there's different ways to look into the forest. It could be a literal forest, because there are a lot of forests. When it talks about Lebanon here, a little bit farther on, you'll find Lebanon there. That's the base of some mountain, not where Lebanon is, the country is today, where Ebola or whatever that is up there, it's like Israel. This is the area on the slope of the mountain, and there were a lot of forest back then. So there's some resource I looked at when it talks about the trees, they link that to elders or leaders. There's some that says it's trees, it's not a tree because the forest man. So he says, the Lord is, verse 19, the land is burned up, the people shall be a field for fire, no man shall spare his brother. He shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry. That's what people think, well, they're biting their arms. I don't think self-cannibalization is what he's talking about. He, God, shall devour on the left hand and not be satisfied. Every man shall eat the flesh of his own arm. The arm there is kind of like more of a metaphor of when Israel was having problems, the brothers got together and helped each other. When Judah was still alive and his brothers got in trouble, he helped his brothers out. Well, now you've got Joseph's children attacking Judah. And so it's just really, really amazing because Joseph's children are Manasseh and Ephraim. And Manasseh and Ephraim are fighting among themselves in the northern tribe. And then their goal is to come down and destroy Judah because they're angry. Anger does a lot to destroy people. Every man shall eat the flesh of his own arm. That's talking about destroying those that support you. Verse 21, Manasseh shall devour Ephraim and Ephraim Manasseh. Together it shall be against Judah. You're talking about nephews going against your uncle. Not only are the two brothers fighting amongst themselves, but they're also going after Judah's descendants. I've heard of family feud, but this is really astounding that this many years later, that it's so intense at this time. God is saying, I never made you a nation so that you could do this. You were never supposed to split up. You were supposed to follow me. I was going to be your God, and you wanted a king. I gave you a king. You didn't like him. I gave you two more kings, and then you could fought amongst yourselves until you split my Israel. And one day he's going to put that. I learned Ezekiel talked about the two sticks in his hand. He took two broken sticks and put them in his hand like that. So I'll look like a whole stick. One day Israel will be joined with Judah again, be one nation again. But they won't have until money. So it hurts God. This is his people. We are his people. And so it hurts God when we be angry at one another and seek to devour one another. You know how we devour people today? By gossip. Talking bad about someone that destroys their reputation. One of my prayers, incidentally, for Trump was that he wouldn't pick on Biden for his mental acuity. And he didn't. He was very confident. Matter of fact, because I didn't watch the speech, I wanted to watch the next day, all that shit. And it was one where they showed an expert of Trump saying, come on now, let's not be children. And that was what Biden accused Trump of, which he's trying to down. Well, if you run out of ammunition, then you start picking on the person. Now, why did Trump just stay in the fact? And not that God answered my prayer, that he listened to some of his leaders and some of the people helping him today. Don't get angry at Biden. Keep it down, keep it level, keep it calm. Don't pick on him for his mental. I think one time he called him a fool, but they were having like a short age. But for the most part, I thought he kept his composure. Not like back when he was the first press time around when he was losing his temper and yelling at him. Anyways, again, it ends in last part of verse 21. For his anger is not turned away, but his fist is still poised to strike. Now, chapter 10 starts out with what sorrow awaits, or woe to those who decree unrighteous decrees. Is that those in our country today? A lot of countries got that same problem. A lot of countries are trying to overthrow the government. When Cuba was being run by Cuba or Batista, and Castro started out, him and his brothers, his gang of ragtag armies and that. They started out with to support of all the people. We're going to make this a good place to live. It wasn't long after that he started killing the enemies and killing the press, and he became down. He's still in control there. And people that get out of Cuba, flee out of Cuba, they come here and say, we're running the same thing here now in Miami. And here, we get the same regime that's oppressing us that we had in Cuba. We're getting people from other nations. I remember Ray Inouye was talking about how his wife, his mom was talking about the oppression in the United States, and how much it is like what they had years ago in their time of regime. And it's just amazing how other nations see us fall apart. And God says that the Israelites fell so apart that people were laughing at them. They were in derision. Remember, people mocked them because they were falling apart as a nation. Their armies weren't winning any war. We haven't won any war since World War II. We've been in skirmishes, but we've lost most of them. And so other nations are looking at us. Now, they are looking somewhat still at us as leaders, because there are some European nations that are still following our example. But our example is going downhill pretty fast. If we lose the dollar as an exchange across the world, that'll really hurt us economically. And so you guys know what everything costs. And so you've got people that are robbing the needy of justice. Think of particularly those people that were arrested for walking around the ground back in January 6th. And they're still in jail. The trial and we're charged with nothing. And they robbed the needy of justice. They take what's right for the poor. Good as maybe you're great. Now, taking money from the poor could be nothing more than government help. I'll help you get off with it. What you got to do is you got to don't marry that guy. Have as many kids as you want, by as many different men you want, but don't marry anybody. As long as that father is not in the household, we can give you money. We can give you food stamps. We can give you clothing. We can give you all kinds of stuff. And so when you look at what the government offers us, I don't think any one of us want to be on a government dole. For those of us that are on Social Security, that's our money. We've had discussions with younger people that say, you're taking money from me. No, dear, I put that money in myself. That's my Social Security. I put money in to get it out. I worked all those years, now I'm living off the residuals of it. And so people don't understand. And they say they may rob the father. And the people that have no father in the family's falling apart, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's goal that's on the left or against God wants to destroy the nuclear family. What's strengthened the nuclear family? And you see a lot of people of all different nationalities claiming that the main thing that we need in our households is a at-home dad. Kids need to stop. Kids need both parents to grow up. And sadly, some of us have not always obeyed that rule, but that's what happened. And we wonder, why are kids going astray? And of course, we get kids going astray from good parents. It's just like when you read the Kings, good kings had bad kids. Bad kings had good kids. There's no guarantee how they're going to come out. And so you need to stay in tune with God. Kids are a gift from God. Sometimes I wonder. So, God says in Psalm 127, you're a heritage, a gift from God. And they belong to Him. Sometimes I just want to say, well, God, take them. I'm done with them. So, verse 3, what will you do in the day of punishment and in the desolation which will come from afar? To whom will you flee for help? And where will you leave your glory? Without me they shall bow down among the prisoners, and they shall fall among the slain. For all this, my fist is still poised to strike. And he's using Assyria. Assyria came down and destroyed Aram and Israel. They did that big deal then. And then back in chapter 8, turn back over to chapter 8 again. Verse 5 of chapter 8. We're there, chapter 8 of Isaiah, verse 5. The Lord also spoke to me, saying, inasmuch as these people refuse the water of Shiloh that flows softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Ramallah's son, now therefore, behold, the Lord brings up over them the waters of the river, Euphrates, among the strong and mighty, the king of Assyria in all his glory. He will go up over all his channels and go over all his banks. He will pass through Judah. He will overflow the Passover. He will reach up to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings, which will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. So he's talking about given power to Assyria to go down and attack Judah and Jerusalem. So, this is Tiglath-Pileser. He is the third. He's the king, and then there's Sennacherib was after him in Assyria. They came down. Not only did they destroy Amram and Syria, but they also destroyed all of the 10 tribes of Israel. So Assyria thought to himself, the king of Assyria thought to himself, wow, so I have great success. Everywhere I go, I'm able to conquer everybody. So in verse 5 of chapter 10, woe, or what sorrow awaits Assyria, the rod of my anger, and the staff in whose hand is my exclamation. I will send him against an ungodly nation. God says he's my tool. He's the tool I have in my toolbox. I'm going to use him to punish Judah. He's already been through Israel and so on. So I'm going to use him to punish Israel and Judah for turning away from me. Oh, let me stop there with verse 4. There's many discussions from some of the biblists, because I was in seminary, to discuss the endings of these chapters and verses. I wrote this down, that might be interesting for you, it might not. There's many people that study the book of Isaiah that believe that it's an awkward drop if you stop chapter 9 at verse 21. They feel that because of what it's talking about, chapter 9 should go all the way to verse 4 of chapter 10. And because of the contents of that, it's still making up for what you would talk about in chapter 9. And it's okay with me. It's not a big thing with me, but just the continuity of thought. And what they're saying is that because all this stuff here is where they're going to go, where they're going to plead for help and so on, and a repeat of my fist is so poised to strike, and it's a repeat of a phrase that you before that's your goal. And the reason they say that, I know you'll be excited to hear that. There was a fellow by the name of Cardinal Hugo, and in AD 1250, it's a few years before us, in AD 1250, he put chapters into the Old Testament. Cardinal Hugo. And then a fellow by Robert Stephen, who was a renowned printer, printing the Bible, in AD 1551, not that long ago, 500 years ago or so, he put the verses in. So betwixt the two of them, that's how we got the Old Testament verses checked. Other than that, it was just one long scroll. That's why sometimes I'll say, well, this verse really belongs with this part of it because it's a continuation of thought. And so there's people that break these segments down in paragraphs, in verses, and in chapters, and then also into individual thoughts. You'll notice there's division sometimes between several verses and so on. That's the New Testament. It's kind of like, okay, this is all one thing. A sentence is a complete thought, and a paragraph is complete sentences, and a chapter is a bunch of those type of thing, and a bunch of chapters is a book. Y'all know that, right? One. So it doesn't make any difference to me, but if you're reading this and you're trying to get a continuation of thought, you begin to realize, why are they like this? Why is the Bible divided up like this? Who put the canon together? You add the bibliology doctrine. Kevin did that a while back. So why is the Bible something we can believe in and so on? And then when you realize what these weren't put together in chapters or verses until later on, actually in 1512 and 1500s, that's fairly recent when the scriptures are 8,000 years prior to Christ. What we're talking. I don't know if that helps you now. They don't know what I was. But then again, I'm not sure. What God is trying to prove to these nations besides Israel is that God is sovereign in His unity. Now, it's one thing for us to say, that's another thing for us to realize that Kevin touched on that one of the questions that we answered. Is God in His sovereignty knows what's going to happen, and He directs people to follow along with His sovereignty. And sometimes we have what we have brought up, the permissive will of God. And so, I don't really care what church you work with, but I think I'm the only one wearing a race for the 4th of July. You know what tomorrow is? What kind of Americans are you sitting there with all these other shirts on? Not a problem. Well, have any shirts like that? Oh, well, I can't read it from here, though. Oh, it's a flag. I thought it was right. These are my readers. I can barely see you.
Well, you need to get better readers.
A t-shirt is made.
Yeah. It's non-fun. They're giving us their time, but I don't know.
We love you, Stu. You're on camera.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Anyway, so God is sovereign in the universe, and man is fully accountable to God for all his acts. So each battle with the nations that don't follow God is actually a battle between their pride, Assyrian pride, as evidence to what the king says, and Yahweh. No one's going to win. Everyone knows that. So in our nation today, those that set themselves up as little gods, and after over this 9/11, said we're going to rebuild, we're going to build bigger and better, and we'll have a higher tower, and it's called the Tower of Freedom, all those things. And when we stand up against God, said we don't need you, we can do it ourselves. It's like the little kid that's 3 years old wants to ride a tricycle, and let me go, I do it myself. Those of you that have children, you know, and grandchildren, so I can do it myself. All over. Take the training wheels off, I'm ready. So it's something that we do because we're prideful. We have a nature that's full of pride. And we tell God, well, I can handle this myself. Most times we can't. We need God's help. And so this is what's going on. It's a battle between the Assyrian king's thoughts and Yahweh, the sovereign Lord. So he's saying there, woe to Assyria. I will send them against the 9 nations, against his people. I'll give them charge to seize the spoil, to take prey and tread down the like mire in the streets. Yet he does not mean so, nor does his heart think so. It is in his heart to destroy and cut off not a few nations. So God is using the king of Assyria to destroy the nation of Israel, counting north and south. He's using them, and he's going to allow them to kill many Israelites. Many Israelites. Thousands upon thousands of Israelites. So he's allowing the king of Assyria to do that. And the king of Assyria said, it's me that's doing it. It's not their God. I'm bigger than their God. I can whip their God. I've already whipped the gods of other nations. Then he goes into a list. Verse 8 says, for he said, are not my princes altogether kings? So he's got some princes there. And so one day they're going to be kings over all this land that I'm winning for them. Then he gives a list, I think, of 5 cities. In verse 9, he says, does not Calno like Carchemish or whatever that is, and Hamath like Arpad, is not Samaria like Damascus. As my hand has found the kingdoms of the idols who carve in it and excel those of Jerusalem and Samaria, as I have done with Samaria and her idols, shall I not do also to Jerusalem and her idols. He had a wonderful campaign. He's whipping up on these other nations that God really doesn't care about in that sense. And so Assyria's been chosen to be a tool of God to go in and discipline his children by killing them, take them off in captivity and so on. And when the Assyrians did this, they didn't do it the same way that Babylon did. Babylon took them and put them in cities together and actually kept them safe in cities. That's what God said. And Ezekiel said they're supposed to go into captivity. When they're in captivity, they'll be safe. I'll keep them safe and I'll give them good captives that are holding them captive there. And they prospered while they were in captivity. The way the Assyrians did is they go in and conquer a nation, they take 2/3 of that nation and move it somewhere else, and then bring 2/3 of another nation in there so they can never join together again and rise up to assert power back. And so they did that in the family, they split families up, they split neighbors up, they split all kinds of things up. And all right, every 5th man and his wife would go here, every 4th couple would go here, and so on. And it was a way to defeat them morally. They could never come together again. That's when God changed the languages at our Babel, so they couldn't communicate. Communication is so important. Those of you that are married know communicate very important. You got to learn to listen to your wife. I'm still learning. Verse 12, therefore it shall come to pass when the Lord has performed all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, that he will say, I will punish the fruit of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and glorious how he looked. The king of Assyria was a tool of God, but he didn't recognize it. He thought that he was all powerful. He said, didn't I conquer all these nations in 5 days? And they had gods that they believed in, and I just tore them up. I just walked in there and knocked everybody down, and I conquered all these nations. So I can walk in and take, and I've already conquered the gods of Samaria, which is northern 10 tribes. I've already conquered their God. Well, Samaria was really part of that, of God, Jehovah God, but yet they were, but God allowed them to be disciplined by punishment. And the king of Assyria said, by the strength of my hand I have done it, by my wisdom, for I'm prudent, I have also removed the boundaries of people. That's moving boundary. Now, much like a political campaign, let's change the way we have our voting and move boundaries here and there. It's always to their advantage, whichever one's trying to do. They both do it. But if I move this boundary line, I'm going to have more Democrats and more Republicans here. I robbed their treasuries, and so I put down the inhabitants of like a valiant man. My hand is, verse 14, my hand is found like a nest, the riches of the people, as one gathers eggs that are left. I've gathered all the earth, and there was no one who moved his wing or opened his mouth. Not even a peep, though. It's almost like he went into a hen house, and he robbed all the eggs. And that's what Assyria did. They get down into the northern 10 tribes and robbed them of their crop, robbed them of this, robbed them of that. And they weren't able to do anything. And so he says, I'm so successful, I'm so important, I'm so powerful. It's me that's doing this. It's not your God using me. I'm not used by any God. I'm my own man. So verse 15 says, shall the axe boast itself against him who chops with it? Or shall the saw exalt itself against him who saws with it? What do you think that's talking about? It's hard to talk. Somebody answer me on these two questions. What are they talking about there?
Which was a little more powerful than control.
Boasting.
And it's talking about both. Did you ever cut something with a saw and realize you made a bad cut? And then blame the saw like, or you're trying to screw something and it never slips up and goes into your finger, playing the screwdriver.
Yeah, always.
Always. I know. There's the old saying with the finished carpenter measured twice and cut once. I wonder how many times I cut this board, it's still too short. And when finished carpenter doesn't cover up the mistakes of the rough carpenter. Put that flower off, you can see the mistakes in the first night of the meter and the rough carpenter put up the studs. Some of the studs are off and just move stuff over. So that's what he's saying. He said they're just tools. God uses us as tools many times. We're vessels. Remember that verse in the New Testament said many vessels are to dishonor, some vessels are to honor. We're vessels used by God. We have the gospel in earthen vessels. Remember those verses in the New Testament? We are vessels for God to be used by God to spread the gospel. Now, if we don't do that, then we are kind of like vessels of dishonor. So then God has the option to do whatever he wants with them. Those of us that want to spread the gospel, to bring people into our lives that we get a chance to witness to. He'll help use us to create, grow his church, his universal church. And so when we are used of God, we don't always know it until afterwards it yields some kind of a fruit. So, wow, I didn't realize what I said had that much impact on someone. The idea is that we are used by God if we allow him to use us. We are vessels unto honor. If we don't allow, then we're vessels unto dishonor. What he's saying there, he said, I took the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, and he said, I gave him power. He went in there and wiped out all 10 tribes up north. He wiped out Aram and wiped out all these other Damascus and all these other countries. He was successful. He even listened. I did this. I went in these nations I took over. Surely I can take over a little town like Judah. I'm in a country like Judah, and I can take over a little town like Israel. Let me back up. I can go into Judah, and I can take over Jerusalem. I get so excited, I'm way ahead of myself. I just said something I wanted to say 5 minutes from now. That's what he's talking about, verse 15. Shall the saw exalt itself? Shall the axe exalt itself? And as if the rod could wield itself against those who lift it up, or a staff could lift it up, as it would not, he would. So he's making kind of like something that is ridiculous to prove a point. He's saying, you got an axe in your hand. Was the axe determine where it's going to chop the wood? Did the axe suddenly decide it's going to cut your toe off instead? That's not what it is. So it's ridiculous when we think about that. Yet many times we blame God for not acting in our life or acting too much in our life. We're just when we're just tools.
Was to the personal computer was designed to be a tool for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And now with the new software and everything, it's going to argue with us and fight with us. Have difference of opinions with us.
That's just the start of it from what my fears are from AI. Because Elon Musk is very knowledgeable on it, so we're going down the wrong road here. And I can't imagine that. I've seen it written as I peruse some of the YouTube stuff. These robots are so delightful that when they question them, if you ever attack a human, no, it's not in my program. And everyone wants to say, yeah. And you can program a robot to do that. I watched iRobot because if they have the red eye, those red eye. So he's saying that the idea is that anything that we use as a tool, good and bad things, like God gave us medicine. He gave it morphine. And it's good for somebody in term life, people that are in hospice and that, and in pain, come up to drip, and they don't care if they just keep pressing that drip and that they use the pain. They're on their way either to heaven or to the other place, and use the benefit of it. Some of the cough medicine we give it is actually works, not the cough. Some of the medicine that comes from other countries, sinus only, and wonder most of our pain medication. Most of our depression medication, that's interesting. I'm depressed. Well, you get some medicine from family, no wonder you're depressed. So when you look at everything God gives us as tools, we no longer have to take the plow with that lead walk behind the wheel. Now we got tractors, and one brother-in-law had a tractor that you had to take a ladder almost to get up in it. Huge tires. Tires were taller than me. And it was for riding through corn and stuff like that, so you could see where you're going. And it had tinted windows, had a radio, had air conditioning, a plush seat that rolled up and down like that. And I looked up at it and said, "You want to drive it?" I said, "No, I would know how to drive that." GPS. Yeah, oh, they do? It used to be the farmer would look down and find a tree or something, so well, keep your eye on that. You kept your eye, which is a good biblical example. God says, "Look unto me, the author and finisher of your salvation." Don't look down. That's it. And look up. I read about this. My dad worked on the farm, but he would tell me occasional stories about that. That the farmer had to use dead reckoning. And so we learned to use tools. We improve our tools and so on. As Jesse brought out, the computers were used to help her. I don't know when my computer goes down or it won't do what I wanted to do. It's like, what better you? And I try to argue with it. You ever try to argue with the computer? I do. I said, I'm supposed to be able to push this button, something will happen, nothing's happening. Nothing happened. All right, so he said that verse 16. Therefore, the Lord of hosts, make sure you know what he's talking about, will send leanness among the fat ones. That leanness is a lack of knowledge. That leanness is a lack of protection. You're no longer under the protected umbrella of God. Leanness doesn't mean there's going to be no fat people. What it means that leanness is leanness of the knowledge of the Word of God, leanness of good people to lead you, leanness over all the things you enjoy. You're not going to be able to enjoy them anymore. And that's going to be among the fat ones. Get us on a diet program. And under his glory, he will kindle a burning, like the burning of a fire, so the light of Israel be to a fire, and his holy one for a flame. He'll burn and devour his thorn, his fire in one day, and it will consume the glory of this forest. Just talking about the Assyrian forest. And of a fruitful field, both body, soul and body, and you'll be when a sick man wastes away. And the rest of the trees of the forest will be so few in number that it shall be counted. So devastation. So often we believe that the children of Israel are just millions and millions of people, and there'll always be millions and millions of people. Time and time again, God destroys all but a few. Remember the second son of Isaiah's name, that's her long name, a remnant will return to God. And then when Isaiah went to talk with these people, Rezin and Pekah, and they were afraid that they would come down. And God told Isaiah, "Don't be afraid. Take your second son with you. A remnant will return as a witness to these two men." He said, "They're not going to last for long. They're going to be done for. I'm going to take care of them." That's up there with it. In verse 12, he said he will punish the arrogant heart of the Assyrian king. That again is Elisha, the third, because he says that in his arrogant heart that I've done all this stuff. I have to go all the way to my knees. I did this, not God. And then he goes with the illustration about you can't, have your fool doing what it wants to do. And then verse 19, the remaining trees, some translation mean the leaders. You so few, but I really believe it's talking about tree. You can use it as, kind of another meaning. It could be the leaders, it could be to destroy the leader first and most. But this would be the trees, literally. I have the name for trees, because of the forces do have. The thing that happened to Assyria in 701 BC, Assyria besieged Jerusalem, and God slew 185,000 in 1 night. Now, what he's talking about here, I'll catch up to where my notes are. Verse 20, it says, "It shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, his son's name, the remnant shall return to God, and as such have escaped of the house of Jacob will never again depend on him who defeated him, never again depend on Assyria, which Assyria wiped out. They tried to depend on Babylon, they got wiped out. So God has always destroyed those that Israel lead on Egypt. When God destroyed Egypt, he said, "You'll never be a nation of power again." They're always a nation, but they've never been a nation of power. And so Israel has always tried to lead. Even Abraham went down to Egypt twice to avoid some problems in the promised land. God never told him to go down to Egypt. He went down 2 different times. Almost got himself and his wife killed. And then his son did the same thing like father, like son. Ishmael went down, not Ishmael, Isaac went down there as well. And so when you think about the example we are for our children, what kind of example are we for our children, or our grandchildren, or our neighbors' children? Fortunately, I have kids, so I don't have to worry about that. So the rest of it says, "But they will depend on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. The remnant will return. The remnant of Jacob said, "My God." And so this is talking about the regathering at the end times, at the end of tribulation. They're going to regather. And they will know their God. This is kind of a double thing, because they'll be regathered prior to the tribulation period. There's a regathering now, but most of them are in disbelief of Yahweh. They don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, but they're gathering there. There's more now in Israel than there ever was before. It used to be there's more Jews in America than there was in Jerusalem. Now there's more Jewish people there going to the city, but it's still lying in ruin. They still don't have a temple, and they won't have a temple until the tribulation period starts. And of course, it'll be too late for those that are not saved to go through the tribulation period. Verse 22, "For though your people Israel be as the sand of the sea, though they be so numerous," and that's what a lot of the Jewish people today say, "Well, we are so numerous." They're not. In chapter 9, I think, 9, 10, or 11 in Romans, Paul said not all of Israel are saved. He simply meant that out of the whole entire nation of Israel, only a small portion are really truly believing. That's the remnant. As the remnant could say, during the time of the Babylonian captivity, the people that went into captivity were saved physically. During the Assyrian captivity, they weren't saved physically. They were cut down. Some escaped. It's like they were cut down. He said, the rest of that is in verse 22. "Though your people always will be as the sand of the sea, as many as they were, only a remnant will return. The destruction decree shall overflow with righteousness." It's hard for me to imagine the righteous God destroying people that he loved. People say, God is a God of love. He's going to save everyone. He's not going to let any people suffer. God is a God of love, and he's not going to destroy. There's no such thing as hell, like the fire. None of that stuff. It's just wording, and it's just speculation. It's not really true. It's just fanciful talking. It's just allegory. My hell is here on earth. I've heard a lot of people tell me that too. My hell is here on earth. I take that revelation. I said, So this is your hell, yeah, look right here, says that hell is gonna be cast in the fire, so your hell's gonna, that's what's on. So the idea is that people think that God is just fooling around and says God of love. Jesus said, no, I'm the only one. You can't get to God without going through me. There's only one way. Oh, you're part of that one way stuff. Yeah, I am. It's a young way proposition. What you Jesus, we don't go through it all. Yeah. Yep. And so remnant will return, the destruction decree shall overflow righteousness. So his judgment with righteousness, he's not looking to punish these people, but he knows he's gonna have to. He's gonna have to take some of them near and dear to him and punish them by either calling them home or sending them off to hell. That's righteous. That's having a right attitude towards sin. If we had more righteous judges, they would judge according to what is right, not according to what is politically, not according to what bribe they can get. When watching some of these interviews they have with new judges coming up and one came on the higher court in the States and that, some of them are, I mean, Senator Hawley and John Kennedy and that, I mean, these people, if you're so stupid, you want to apply for the position of Washington woman, want to apply for the position of some bench that dealt with, forget how it was, that she'd never tried a case in court on that. So he asked her, she went through a litany of all my experience, this, but so the answer would be 0. Well, I went through all this other my, so the answer would be 0. Yeah. Then he asked her another question. You want to go through this? He said, then the answer would be 0. And yes. And so she wants to apply for this, she has no experience in. And then he asked her, what are the 6 or 7 reasons? Just give me one reason why you can overturn after race trial. So my vast experience. Give me one reason. And they just filibuster and finally their time's up. Watching them work, it's really a work of art.
What's really sad is, you know, I've heard Lindsey Graham last week or a couple weeks ago. They've made a deal among senators. We'll go ahead and approve this set of, but I mean, it's the thing that the senators do. We'll approve X amount of judges. They don't care what the morality of the judges are.
Oh, I think the least.
Because one of his things was if they're going to keep on pulling this, well, we're just not going to make a deal with you anymore. It's always making a deal, always. And it's really sad. This is why I tell people, you know, you can't run around and you know, wave a red flag, say I'm Republican, because it doesn't exist. That's the reality. That's true. And the fact is you have a few that stand up, but you know, they make the display, you know, on television or for but the thing is they still vote yes. They're not.
It's an agreement that
Yeah.
So we can see our nation in here. I'm not going to say we're going to suffer the same. I'm not the prophet. I'm just saying that nation after nation is going to get God has disappeared. And Israel is the only nation that's never been put out of business. Totally. God has kept Israel as a nation since Jacob wanted his 12 sons. And God knows everyone that is one of Jacob's sons' children. And when he regathers them in the millennium, they will all know which tribe they belong to. All the priests will know which part of Levi tribe they are from, part of Aaron, whether it's going to be just priest or whether it's going to be into the actually sacrifice part of it. We know that David's going to be there, but he's not a priest. He won't have any ability to go into the temple. But we do know who sits on a throne in the temple, and that's going to be Jesus Christ. So we know it all works out. You know, Romans and Corinthians and all those say it's always good to serve God. It's always going to work out good for us. In the same token, we have to undergo all the things that we're seeing in our country. And I still love our country. You know, Chris was saying, I still support our country. I still wish and pray for the best for our country. But many times I say to myself, you know, why would you want to bless the United States when it turn against you? When you politicians say, God bless America, why really, you are so much against God's rules and ruling, and the judge should be, blind to partiality. The judge should judge based on the facts. And we have so many judges that don't do that. And I believe that they're going to have a harsher punishment if they're not saved than those that are saved. where if those that are saved will lose rewards. Almost everything they do will have no reward. If you say it doesn't by fire, if you're unsaved, I think they're going to be judged by what the record is, their works, for what they did, and their punishment is going to be assigned to just how bad they were. Verse 24, therefore thus says the Lord God of hosts, O my people who dwell in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrian. He will strike you with a rod and lift up his staff against you in the manner of Egypt. For yet a very little while, and the indignation will cease in my anger and their destruction. And the Lord will stir up the spirits from during the time of the children of Israel in Egypt. The staff of Aaron opened up the Red Sea for the children to pass over dry land. And then Aaron's rod came down, and the sea swallowed up and destroyed the armies of Egypt. During the time of chapter 7 in Judges, the time of Gideon, it was the Midianites. They were attacking them, kept them under slavery for so long. And Gideon rose up as a judge and delivered them. And he had 300 men to kill all these people. Hold your place here and come over to chapter 37. Chapter 37 of Isaiah. In verse 36, chapter 37 in Isaiah, verse 36. This is in the days of Hezekiah. Of course, we'll get to it, but I just want to point this out to you. Because God is reminding the children of Israel of how he delivered them before. Don't worry about all that the Assyrians are going to do. Don't worry about what the king of Assyria is going to do to you. I will still save you. Remember back in chapter 8 where it said that Assyria will come down and there'll be water up to their neck? Chapter 8. When the Assyrians come in there, they're going to be very fearful and they're going to do a lot of destruction there. You're going to tear some homes apart. They're going to kill some people in that. But God said, don't worry about it. When they have accomplished, when my tool has been used, and the tool is closed, and I'm done with it, I'm going to rise up and destroy them. And it says right here, verse 36 of chapter 37, then the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrian 185,000. And people rose early in the morning, there were the corpses, all dead. When that trip, the king of Assyria departed, went away, returned home, and remained in Nineveh. Of course, that's that country that Jonah went to be preaching in. Now it came to pass that he was worshiping the house of Nebuchadnezzar's God, that his 2 sons struck him down with a sword, and they killed him. That's what happened to him. And the other one under Gideon, that was King Oreb. And King Oreb fought with the Israelites when God and Gideon got together. And he was defeated and he ran away. And he was killed after his escape. So the 2 kings that were against them, and we read different things about Oreb and so on, how powerful a king he was, the guys that wiped him out like that, should do the same thing to Assyria. So he said in verse 20, back to chapter 10, verse 26, and the Lord of hosts will stir up the spirit for him like the slaughter of Midian after the rock of Oreb. And as his rod was on the sea, so he will lift up the manner of Egypt. So that's what he's telling them, is remember what I did for the children of Israel at the sea, Red Sea, when Moses lifted up his rod and you were able to pass over in dry land. Remember that? I took care of you. Also remember when Gideon was a judge and I delivered the children of Israel out of the hand of Oreb, wicked king of the Midianites. Remember those 2 things? I could surely deliver you if I want to. So he tells us the same thing. No matter what's going on in your country, he can deliver us if he chose, if he could. He's the Almighty God. He's the sovereign God. He chooses to do what he wants to do. We are accountable for our own act. Look at verse 27, it's going to pass in that day that the burden will be taken away from the shoulder, and the yoke around your neck, and the yoke will be destroyed because we're going off. Now he's talking verse 28. I won't go through all these cities now, but what he's talking about is king of Assyria coming down. He's marching closer to Jerusalem. All these cities are like this one, then next one, next one, next. So he's traveling south to get to Jerusalem. And so he's already down there, and verse 32, as yet he will remain at Nob. Now Nob is just a few, let me see if I wrote that down. Nob just a little bit north of Jerusalem. And they're on this hill, and the hill is higher than Mount Olive, Mount Zion type of thing. So they're able to look down on the city. And he's shaking his fist and said, "It won't be long now. I'm going to conquer you like I conquered everybody else." So God allows him and his troops to go down into the city of Jerusalem and destroy it. And so what he says here, he said, verse 32, and yet he remained at Nob. That day he would shake his fist at the mount of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. Verse 33, behold, the Lord of hosts, the Lord of hosts will lop off the bough with terror, likening him unto a tree. Those of high stature will be hewn down, those are leaders, and the haughty will be humbled. Verse 34, he will cut down the thickets of the forest with iron, and Lebanon, of course, Lebanon was one of those slopes on the mountains there, when Lebanon, we know where Hezbollah comes from. But Lebanon will fall by the mighty one. So no matter what man puts up against God, when he decided that I'm not done with you, my fist is still raised to strike, the poised to strike. We don't know what he's going to do with our nation, China, Russia. We don't know. When the Holocaust happened, he destroyed pretty much all of Germany. Hitler's gone. Not very long after that. In fact, there's some talk that he killed himself. And others talk that somebody went and killed him. Whatever it was, he's dead. That type of thing. So God used him to punish the Israelites. So they talk about the Holocaust, how horrible it was, and that's true. Right up at that point, they had traveled so far away from God. But what the Holocaust did do for the Jews was cause the Holocaust was over 45, 46. A couple of years later, they were recognized as a nation. So out of that bad, God meant good for Israel that in 1948 they became a nation and they recognized as a nation. And of course, the next recognition was on our former president when he put the headquarters back in Jerusalem where it should be. And so when you look at Israel, for all its faults, God still saved a remnant. For all of the United States faults, He will still save a remnant of His children. Now, I don't know what we'll go through. Not a prophet. I can tell you what's going to happen in the United States. I have no idea. But it sure looks like the writing is on the wall. We're a whole lot closer to the rapture than we were, in Paul's day. 2,000 years closer. I have no idea what will happen in our lifetime or in Luke's time, or whatever, or in Asher's time. His timing is to the point. He knows when he's coming back. Jesus said, only the Father in heaven knows the exact time. I'm not going to tell you to be 3 Saturdays from today, as you won't come back, I think, but next week we'll get into chapter 11 and 12. Chapter 11, if you want to read ahead, is one of the most famous sections of Scripture. I remember I telling you that Isaiah is filled with prophecies about becoming the righteous one, becoming king, becoming Jesus, Messiah, and it's the most often quoted book in the New Testament. But we look at some of them. I'm excited to be in Isaiah again. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Any questions before we close? How did I do that right? You and me started right. Thanks for coming, guys. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you so much for the lessons we can learn from the prophet Isaiah. Deal with nations as you deal with your people. Help us to have a healthy fear of you dealing with us as we try to walk in light each day. What a healthy fear we have of doing something that would cause you to discipline us more severely than what we normally do. Lord, help us to walk righteously, walk with integrity in this world. Help us to be a beacon to other families in the church and other people we meet in our neighborhood. And people have asked us the reason of the hope we have in us. And we can share why we believe that we know what we're doing when we die. Be with us as we try to live out our salvation in fear and trembling, Father, that you work through us. Bless this time that we spend tonight there. Be with each person here that they've drawn closer to you, closer to their wives and family as a result of spending time with you. We thank you again for a church that preaches your rule. Bless us now, Father, that might show you honor and glory in all that we do. Amen.